You are an imposter. They're going to see through you. The first time going on a stage is horrifying.
This is DevOps Paradox, episode number 272, How to Become a Speaker at Conferences. Welcome to DevOps Paradox. This is a podcast about random stuff in which we, Darin and Viktor, pretend we know what we're talking about. Most of the time, we mask our ignorance by putting the word DevOps everywhere we can and mix it with random buzzwords like Kubernetes, serverless, CI/CD, team productivity, islands of happiness, and other fancy expressions that make us sound like we know what we're doing. Occasionally, we invite guests who do know something, but we do not do that often since they might make us look incompetent. The truth is out there, and there is no way we are going to find it. P.S. It's Darin reading this text and feeling embarrassed that Viktor made me do it. Here are your hosts, Darin Pope and Viktor Farsic.
Viktor, how did you get started speaking at conferences?
I was invited to a conference without submitting. I had some open source project, BDD, something about behavior-driven development, some desktop application that allowed you to drag and drop tests, something like that. Anyways, I was invited to speak at Agile something in Orlando, out of blue. And that was a horrible experience. The year after that, all the experiences related to public speaking were absolutely horrible. Don't do it. This is the message to listeners. Don't do it.
So what you're saying is you got the call and it was the most wonderful thing that's ever happened, and it's only been up and to the right since that point.
Yeah, I mean, it's like starting everything new is tough. And this is double tough because you're in front of people, your peers. You feel intimidated. You don't know how to prepare. You don't know how much to prepare. You don't know whether to read or to memorize. You're afraid how they will perceive you. You are an imposter. They're going to see through you. The first time going on a stage is horrifying.
Could I also say probably the second, third, fourth, and fifth times it's horrifying as well.
Exactly. I mean, every time slightly less. You start getting a gist of it. But another, probably even more horrifying thing, at least to me, was rejection. The first conference I was invited, but afterwards I thought, hey, this is cool. I should be doing this, even though it was horrifying, right? I want to do it again. I want to do it one more time. And then you submit and then you get rejected. And you submit to some other and you get rejected. You get rejected and rejected and rejected. Now, whether that's because nobody knew who I was or because my abstracts were horrible or whatever other reason, I have no idea. But you get rejected over and over and over again. And then you get accepted to another one, right? And then over time, the number of rejections lower. Eventually, you might be invited and you might not be submitting anymore. But that rejection cycle is horrible, which is not that different from job hunting. Try to remember when you were young and you are applying for a job and then you get rejected. And then you think, okay, so I'm not good at this, right? It takes a bit of time to understand that actually rejection is part of it.
Rejection is a part of it. I probably started speaking before you started speaking. I used to speak at a bunch of Sybase and Microsoft SQL Server conferences back in the 90s. And then I sort of went dark after that time. I think 99 was probably the last one of those that I did. It was fun. It was scary as all get out. And I got to see some cool places in doing it. First time I ever went to San Francisco was a conference. First time I ever went to Australia, that was a conference. First time I went to Germany, it was a conference. But then all of a sudden, I started having to deal with other things. So I didn't do conferences for a long time. Now, unlike you, I'm trying to get back out on the conference circuit, quote unquote. I'm starting with a local conference in my town, and that's sort of how I'm getting my toe back into the waters of doing a conference talk.
Are you having butterflies, or that's gone forever? How do you feel about speaking?
I don't feel bad about speaking because guess what? I'm speaking right now.
But it's not the same, isn't it?
I have convinced myself that it is. And here's why. Because it's a heck of a lot harder to talk with two people or potentially a single person than it is to a room full of people. Because I'm thinking 2 to 3 minutes ahead, just like I would in a talk. But instead of it being a room of maybe 20 to 30 people, I know that we have, over the time that people download the episodes, we'll have thousands of people listening. That is more fear-inducing to me than a room of 20 people.
It's interesting.
I've been doing demos long enough that demo failures are normal. That doesn't bother me any. It's like, okay, well, we'll go do this. I'm planned better. Like I go back to the 90s and I go to now, I will be better prepared because I've got better hardware to take with me. But thinking of doing a podcast or doing a live stream, to me is no different than doing a talk, other than we're not really prepared, other than we knew that we're going to say how to become a speaker at conferences. That's all that we knew. And we're riffing from there. But I can take that knowledge, and that's how I apply now. Going back to my 90s, I used to create slides. I'll still create slides for this. But it's not going to be bulleted slides, like the death by PowerPoint level. That's not what I'll ever do again. But I can see already what my outline is going to be. And that doesn't scare me. Used to, that scared me a lot.
So here's a question. When you said better prepared, what do you mean by that? Are you doing a demo or just a talk?
I am doing 2 demos and a talk.
Okay. So prepared means preparing a demo, running it many times, or preparing what you're going to say, or both?
Yes, both.
Okay.
And here's the reason why, for me personally, it's not that big of a deal anymore for demos. Is in the day job, I have done, at least at the time we're recording this, over 450 videos in the past, since November of 2020. So in 3.5 years, I've done that many videos. I've gotten the reps in. If I had only been doing a video a month or 2 videos a month, I would not feel the same. I've just done the reps enough now to where, okay, I know what patterns will work. Now, whether they'll go over great, that's a different conversation. That doesn't, mean as much to me. But can it be strong enough to get the demo done? Yeah, I think so. And I think it won't be as painful as it was 20 plus years ago.
This is the first time I'm asking you a question. Normally it's the other way around. This is fun.
Well, I'm going to turn it back around on you. You had somebody ask, then you started applying. Now, how did you know, and how do we know today? Because this is used to, before X removed Twitter, X, whatever you want to call it, removed all the automated stuff. There used to be a feed that I would watch on there of announcing all of the upcoming conferences that you could apply CFP or apply to the CFPs. How do we keep track of where we could even apply? Now, I want to, before we let you answer that, here's my opinion of where you need to start first. Start at local meetups. I mean, when I say local, I mean local. I mean in your town local, or within driving or train distance local. It is doubtful, unless you are Miss Whitney Lee, that you're going to become a keynote speaker within a year at KubeCon. Right, Victor? Would you agree with that?
It's not impossible. You could be the right place, right time, working on the right thing, but highly unlikely, yes.
And that's the key point. It's not impossible, but it is improbable. By the way, congrats to Whitney for keeping on knocking it out of the park. It's amazing what she's doing. What do we need to do today? Would you agree with that? Should you start local first and don't worry about the big? I mean, go ahead and apply to the bigs if you want, but don't focus on that. If you get an acceptance, great. If you don't, keep going.
When initially when you started this part of the discourse, you started with, I'm paraphrasing, how do we keep track of events and stuff like that, right? And I was ready to attack you on that one, but then you corrected yourself saying local, right? There is no strong need to track what's going on, right? If you go local. And I would go even further and not say go local, your city, right? I would say give couple of talks to whichever local community or meetup you're attending. And if you're not attending, just don't. You're going to a meetup. If you're not, start going to meetups or local events like KCDs or whatever. Then start talking at those, right? You're talking among friends. So no strong need to like, where is the event I should apply? Whichever you're attending normally.
And if you're not attending, maybe if you're still back in office, start a lunch and learn.
Yeah, because kind of why, if you're not attending, then why would you expect somebody to attend you?
Oh, that's deep. It is reciprocal.
Yeah. I mean, at least that's how ignoring Orlando and stuff like that. I did early on start speaking in international conferences, but I'm not doing that much, mostly because of lack of time, but I was very, very active in Barcelona in local communities. I would probably go to at least 2 meetups a week. Kind of, I was maybe even exaggerating, right? Kind of, at least 2 days a week, I would go and attend a meetup on something. That was my thing, right? I was part of that community. I knew everybody in Barcelona. I mean, among those other people attending events, and everybody knew me, right? And that was the beginning, or very early on. To be honest, I actually miss those days in a way. I miss being active locally rather than globally, to be honest. There is a certain sense of belonging to a community, right?
It's hard to compare if you were to go to KubeCon in North America. You're just showing up and seeing the sites, doing your thing and getting out. But the people that live in that area, it's like, okay, well, now what? Right? This event's over. Now what? This isn't anything specific to tech either. This is just in general at conferences. You know, the conference comes in, it's basically like a circus, literally. It shows up, it does the thing, and it leaves town.
Those are the big ones, right? But then you have KCDs. And actually, I was really pleasantly surprised that KCD somebody in States, Texas, I believe, Austin, invited Whitney to speak. And Whitney said, hey, do you want to do a talk with me? And, Austin, I love Austin. Let me come. And the organizer said, no. We want to keep this local. Not like no because it's you, just to clarify. But kind of like, no, Whitney, you do it alone. This is a local thing. And I have huge respect for that.
That's interesting. But I agree with them. It's like, let's keep it local. Because we've lost, I think, that locality. That I think probably prior to, when did it really start? Maybe 2010s to 2015, things got really different. Because I was helping run the Java user group in my town. I started the Android and iOS meetups in my town and was really active, but then I changed jobs and wasn't in town as much anymore. So I had to give those things up. There was a lot of fun in that. There was also a lot of hair pulling in that, especially when you're running a meetup and trying to get space and get a sponsor for food and all the other things.
I don't know for Austin and the reasons behind it, and also so I'm not going to speak much about it, but what I can say about some communities in Barcelona where I was in, we were doing something very similar, and we were avoiding to say the word bringing people from outside, even from outside within Spain, right? Because the whole goal of those communities was not to hear the talk of an amazing speaker. It was rather a community. I mean, it probably still is. I'm just not that involved for other reasons. But the whole goal was, okay, so it's 50 of us or 100 of us, right? On average, 20, 30 in every meetup, right? The kind of like, it's us. Rather than, can we have Joe Beda come to talk to us, right? I mean, that was happening every once in a while, not necessarily with Joe Beda, but And that's the part I enjoyed the most, right? It's literally a community, right? It's not just opportunity to hear somebody amazing. You can hear somebody amazing on KubeCon, right? But it's local, it's us, right? And we do this together, and then one of us will just talk about something, right?
It's interesting that we're trying to build community without building community within a community, literally, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, there are different levels of community, right? I do feel that KubeCon is also community, just at a different level, right? It's global or continental or whatever you want to call it. So it's still a community, but I'm now referring specifically to community where literally everybody knows everybody, right? Kind of, it's like if KubeCon I would compare KubeCon itself to a metropolitan city, right? No, this is a village, right? It's a different dynamic. It's not better. It's not worse, but it's a village. It's few of us. We all know each other. We all help each other. We're all there for each other type of situation. And I'm not saying that that's not happening on a more global level, but it's a different dynamic.
So if you aren't even trying to speak at your local area, let's just call it the local area, because that could be, for some people, a 5-minute walk, or for somebody like me, an hour drive. And that's fine. That's what it's going to be where I live. If you're not doing that, don't chase the big ones yet. Now, if you're convinced that you must chase the big one first, and the only thing you're going to do is just submit an abstract, I can tell you, as somebody that's helped run conferences before, the chances of that happening are going to be slim, because what I'm going to do, first thing is first, is where else have you spoken? And let me see a talk that you have done. If that doesn't exist, even on a local level, it's not going to happen.
You can spot whether somebody is experienced or not, even without some reviews, selections are hiding who the speaker is, the name, to make it less biased, which I'm not sure I agree with. But anyways, and you can still, just by reading the abstract, you can say, this person spoke before. This person is experienced. Don't ask me for specifics, but somehow I can guess most of the time just by reading the abstract.
Abstracts don't need to be a dissertation, but they need to cover what you're planning on talking about. Now, can I tell you a secret?
Yeah. You use ChatGPT to write it?
No, I didn't use ChatGPT, but I did use Mistral. I gave it some information, and I told it, hey, I'm wanting to do a conference talk on this subject. Write the abstract and write whatever else I needed for me. And it wrote out everything that I needed. Did I have to change it some? Yes. Did I have to change it a lot for an abstract? No, I didn't.
Exactly.
Because an abstract, if it's bigger than, in my opinion, 3 sentences, it's probably too much. Because you will have to give the greater detail later if you're accepted.
Let me give you one reason why more than a few sentences is too much. Because many of the reviewers will not read more than those few anyways.
Correct. As somebody that's reviewed, the last one that I did, we reviewed, how many did I review? It was almost 500 submissions. Trust me, because it was online in a web box, a text area box, I didn't scroll. So in those 4 or 5 lines that were in the text area, if you didn't catch me there, it's headlines. You got to get the headlines first. Your title has to be key.
I'm going to say something that will disappoint many people, but there is a considerable number of submissions when I review that I don't pass the title. To me, it's in steps, in phases, right? Kind of like title. Okay, I'm not interested in this. If I'm not interested in that, why would I read more, right? Sometimes I don't pass the title. Sometimes not. Sometimes I do pass the title, and then first few sentences, and then very few occasions, the whole shebangs.
I will say too, the title, you got to have a good enough title, but if you've gone too far on the title,
oh yeah,
then it's just as bad as I would rather have a bad title than an overloaded title.
I would characterize it like, and this is my personal thing. I don't like when somebody tries too hard. And that's part of why I'm saying I can spot a newbie, right? Kind of like when you can sometimes feel that kind of like, okay, so this person put so much effort in a title. It's 150 characters long. It explains everything. Kind of, no, I just want to know what are you trying to talk about? Kind of like, you want to talk about, I don't know, NixOS, right? Excellent, cool. Am I interested to hear? Do I believe that people would be interested to hear about NixOS? Yes. Does it feel like you know what you're talking about? Yes. That's it. That's all I need to know. And you don't need 7 paragraphs to tell me that.
The funny thing with the titles is when you're writing it and you're submitting it, read it before you submit it. And ask yourself, would I go to this session? Because if you're not willing to go to your own session, nobody else is going to go either. Trust me on that one. But do you know what can spice up your sessions? Some Barbaro Mojo. Are you ready to spice up your life while you optimize your speech writing processes? Meet Barbaro Mojo, the delicious Cuban hot sauce with a kick that's sponsoring today's episode. Barbaro Mojo brings the heat with their unique Cuban marinade base, adding an unforgettable flavor to your favorite dishes. With flavors like El Habanero, Halibo, Panazzo, and Best Day Ever, there is a perfect match for everyone's taste buds. Not only are these hot sauces gluten-free and vegan, but they're also perfect for spicing up your work-from-home lunches or adding an extra kick to your weekend barbecue. Now trust me, you don't want to miss out on this chance to taste the best Cuban hot sauce that's out there. So go ahead and order your bottle of Barbaro Mojo today, and remember to use the promo code DevOps25, that's DevOps, the number 2 and the number 5, to get 25% off your first order. Thanks to Barbaro Mojo for sponsoring today's episode. Now that we've got all of our hot sauces ready to go, by the way, don't drink a bottle of hot sauce and then try to go give a talk. That would be bad.
Darin, were you with me? I think you were at the conference where there was a competition who is going to eat spicier.
Yes, those were spicy wings.
That was brutal. There was puking involved there.
There was bodily fluids leaving people's bodies. Yes, that's what was happening. But that's one of the things you can look forward to when you go to a conference is people may do silly things. And let me recommend that you do not become one of those people. But the hot sauces, yes, that was quite an interesting day. When I can smell hot sauces, it's like, nope, that's not for me. When I can feel it coming through my skin, no. So we talked about starting at your local places. Even more hyper-local than that is at your workplace. So if you're not willing to start there, and you're not willing to start at a local meetup, then what do you want to do? Why are you trying to do this? Now, let's assume that you are. Let's assume you've checked all those boxes. You've been a good active member. You're really doing good lunch and learns at work. And now it's like, you know what? I've been doing this for a couple of years. I'd like to try to do a more national or international conference. A couple of things. Your first international conference, you are not going to know what's going on. Case in point. I landed in Australia for the first time ever in my life. Guess which side of the car I go to for the cab?
You went to the wrong one.
I went to the driver's side. And the driver was, bless his heart, very polite and was like, mate, you don't know what you're doing. I went, oh, right, thanks. So I can tell currencies, all the other things. By the way, McDonald's everywhere is McDonald's, except in a couple of places.
But that's so much easier now than it was back then, right? We have Google Maps. We have Uber that takes us wherever we want. And we can pay with a credit card ignoring the currencies. That's amazing.
That part is great, I have to admit. The last time I was in France, it was just like, okay, Uber. Of course, I couldn't figure out where the Uber pickup was at the airport. That's a different conversation.
Yeah.
Those are hard. The thing, though, is how do you get to those levels? let's rewind. You've done good building basically a local following, maybe. That might be a way to think about it. You've built up the reps. You've done the reps. But you haven't done the reps at a national level. Let's just stick national for a moment. So how do you get people to understand who you are from a national point of view? Do I dare say?
Go.
Should you do podcast and maybe have a YouTube channel?
Not necessarily. I mean, yes. The answer is yes, but not necessarily, right? I would say that be involved in something public other than speaking. And that can be an open source project. Kind of join seriously an open source project, contribute to it, right? And that will give you the confidence, the credibility, and material, right? Because that's what you're going to talk about, right? And there are many other ways, but I'm not sure that, kind of a person who only speaks at conferences and is not in other ways involved in something public, I'm not sure how much respect I would have for that person, right? Whether that's podcasts or open source projects or whatever else, doesn't matter, right?
But again, to me, I think it's important to have one or the other. I don't think you need to have both like what we do. I think it's by doing what we've done. Now, you were already speaking internationally, so it may not be as big of a deal to you. But for me, having these reps of doing the podcast every week, doing the live stream a few times a month when we can, when everybody's around, has helped me be able to think on my feet. Because guess what? Even if you have your script completely lined out, all your slides are perfect, all the demo is working, you have, terabit up and down fiber in the hall, which you never will, things will still go wrong.
I would compare public speaking or podcasts or quite a few other things to running something in production. There is a difference between what your plan is and what your expectations are and reality, right? In reality, your plan is for your new release to run forever and ever happily. Reality, it will fail. It will be slower than expected. It will not be well received by your users and so on and so forth, right? There are many unknowns. You can distinguish somebody being experienced from not experienced by how well they adapt to those unknowns. And that's one of the reasons why when people ask me, one of the things I always recommend is do not memorize your talk. Because there's actually nothing wrong with memorizing. You need to be very experienced. Actually, memorizing is bad for two reasons. First, because you look like you're reading newspaper when you speak something that you memorized. It takes a lot of practice to memorize and look like you did not memorize, right? It takes a lot of practice. Same thing like videos. I recommend people don't start. Now I'm reading from a teleprompter when I do my videos for other reasons, but until recently I wasn't because it looks more natural, right? In the case of public speaking, it allows you to adapt. I'm not saying that you cannot adapt when you memorize things, but if you don't memorize, if you simply know the subject, if you're a subject matter expert and you know the key points that you want to explain and you just go, you're ready to adapt. Okay, so it's boring. Let me jump, right? Kind of like, let me wake them up. Or this demo does not work, right? Kind of, if I memorize and I go to the script and the demo stops working in one moment, you're blocked. Because it's very hard to adapt from something predefined.
Well, that's why you never do a live demo in the first place, but that's a different
conversation. You always do a live demo. Always do a live demo. And there is nothing better than a live demo failing. Those are the best talks. Look at the person. You see how much somebody knows about that something by seeing how that person adapts on failure.
Comparing it to production is a very sobering way of thinking about it. Now, I will say there's certain parts of when you're building something out that you need to know what you're going to say.
Of course.
And I will argue there are, like towards the end, when you're closing, you need to have, especially if the main point of the end of your talk is to maybe build up a client list or get people on your email list or have people subscribe to your podcast. Yes, please subscribe to the podcast. Have that memorized and cold.
I wouldn't say memorized. I would say that there is a number of bullet points that are important. Let's say 10, whatever the number is, doesn't matter, right? And one of those is, okay, you subscribe to my newsletter, right? Excellent. That's one of those. You know what are the points you need to pass through. Now, you don't necessarily need to memorize the exact phrasing. So it goes like, dear audience, can you please subscribe to my... You can say it in different ways. Like, the important thing is that you need to know what are the key points you need to go through, right? And if you know what they are and you're experienced with it, like, hey, this is not the first time I'm calling you to subscribe to our newsletter, right? I don't need to memorize it. I know what that means, right?
I guess what I meant by memorize in that case is not necessarily the whole block, but there may be specific words or a specific phrase that you always want to nail. Like, you know those phrases.
I think we're on the same page. That what I call bullet points, right? Imagine 5 slides bullet points. That's kind of that's what you want.
Yeah, because if I just say newsletter, we're going off the rails here. If I say just newsletter, it's like, are you going to mail it to me or what? No, it's going to be, make sure you sign up for my email newsletter, right?
Yeah.
There's certain specific things you want to say in closes or even throughout your talk. You want to be able to say things in a specific way. Try not to say so and now and and ah a whole lot. That's hard. Really hard.
There is, and I would like to hear your opinion. There is a different level of tolerance to ums and ahs, depending on whether it's live or not, from the audience perspective. Like, if I listen to a podcast that is recorded, I'm less tolerant to those things than if I listen to a person in front of me live on a stage. I'm not saying that I'm intolerant. I have 100% tolerance, but slightly different.
I will give you that. However, if you are not confident in your speaking abilities, try to get to the point to where you're not searching for words. This is the reason why you need to know the content. If you know the content, hopefully you're not chasing for words as often, because that's when the ums and ahs start coming out.
It's a skill to learn how to pause and be silent instead of doing that. Because you will be searching for words every once in a while. That's inevitable. Unless you literally memorized every single word, right? But there is a difference between, and this is what I want to say, instead of, this is what I want to say. Kind of pause is okay. You make it dramatic.
Being quiet will cover a multitude of sins. Just chase those words in silence. So in becoming a speaker at a conference, I should expect that the conference organizer will pick me up, feed me, and take care of all of my issues that I may have. Correct?
Depends on the conference. The smaller conferences are more welcoming, more hand-holding, more everything, right? When you go to something big like KubeCon, it's kind of, you're in 2 minutes. We don't know whether you arrived, how you arrived, and where you're going after that, kind of like. You're starting in a few minutes, and the moment you stopped, you're out because we're on a schedule here, right? Smaller conferences tend to be more welcoming, right? Oh, you're here, kind of like, can we help you with something? Kind of, do you need some instructions? Things like that. Do you have any plans for tonight? Most important.
So what's interesting with this is Victor can do that because he's built the credibility to do that. Me, on the other hand, that is not going to happen. Because number one, I don't care about getting to that level of speaking again. That's just not on my bucket list. What I want to do, though, as a speaker, when you show up, don't give me an attitude. I'm talking as an organizer right now. Don't give me an attitude. If you give me an attitude, anything you ask for is probably going to get moved down the list below the janitor. Secondly, or on the opposite hand of that, if you come to me as like, hey, how can I help? Guess what? If a slot opens up because somebody bailed, you might get an extra slot. Victor won't do that again. Victor's too good for that nowadays because he flies in on the private jet and, gets catered to.
all that stuff. I flew non-economy, maybe twice, and that was by accident, right? So I'm far from. I actually don't like. I'm going to use the word that you might wanna beep later. I don't like bricks among speakers, and I know a few that were arrogant like that and all those things. I really dislike those attitudes.
That's not how I'm wired. That's just not how I think. So it just doesn't compute to me at all. So let's start recapping here just a little bit. If you're wanting to speak at conferences, speak local. That may mean at your job first, local meetups, local meaning local to you, whatever your local is. Maybe start going out a little bit more regionally. So in the States, I live in North Carolina. I live in the Charlotte area. I could go up to Raleigh. I could go down to Columbia, South Carolina, Greenville, South Carolina. That's still reasonable local to me. If I really want to stretch, I could go down to Atlanta. But now I'm getting into a larger region. I would probably do all of those things before I'd even start trying to get to a national level. Now, if KubeCon happened to come to Charlotte, then sure, I'd probably do that because it's local to me at that point. But if it's to go to Seattle and I have to pay for it out of pocket, no, not going to happen.
One of the things I used to do, I don't know whether you were doing that or not, when I was in a phase of traveling for other reasons, I would contact local meetup and go, no, not necessarily talk, not talk, doesn't matter, but kind of, I was using every opportunity when I traveled to hang out with local community. And that was absolutely awesome. And that also gives you certain perspective and confidence and what's not.
I did that a few times. A lot of times I would be in areas that weren't a tech hub, I guess. There wasn't a whole lot of meetups going on. So it just didn't really work out a lot. But then, on the flip side of that, when I was at a client, what are y'all doing tonight? Anybody want to get wings? Have those types of conversations. That's when you really start to learn how things really work in life and in business. If you want to just be a speaker to be a speaker, start a YouTube channel. Just be done with it. Just be a YouTuber.
But YouTube channel, again, with to me, it's similar to the story we had about Keynote. If you exclude some exceptions, it's a depressing grind. Really, really depressing grind.
And I left in that long pause there on purpose because it is a grind. So if you think that, I'll just start a YouTube channel. Do you have a team? Because there's only so many days in the weekend. And if you're working a full-time job, there's only so many hours at night.
That's the grind part, but then there is the depressing part of, I already published 10 videos and I don't have more than 20 subscribers.
And 5 views per video. If you think speaking at conferences will get you to whatever your next level is, go for it.
But man, that's another depressing thing about conferences. I don't know whether you experience that, but when you go to a conference or a meetup and there are like 3 people in the audience. That's depressing and demotivating.
It's not to me anymore, though. See, I guess it's because I haven't spoken live, but it's usually just you and me or a guest on here. So it's 2 to 3 people all the time anyway. When we're doing our live streams, we can see some of the people that are there. I can see a round number count. But it's, to me, that doesn't, maybe I've been out of the game for so long. And now that when I actually go and do it, it's going to be a different story.
The problem is not that there are 3 people. If it's 3 people in a small room, but the room for 200 people with 3 inside. I don't know about you, but to me that's very depressing.
I guess it would depend on whether or not all 3 people were sitting on the back row of that 200 room.
Yeah, kind of dispersed.
But see, that's when I would probably do my normal, abnormal thing. It's just walk out into the room and sit down beside people while I'm doing the session, just because.
Oh, yeah.
It's just, when things are dealt to you like that, and I don't mean that in a victim way, it's just like when things happen like that, you got to roll with it. This goes back to what we were talking about earlier. You have to be able to adapt really, really fast.
That's the key. Twice at least, when I was in that situation, some meetup, something. In at least those 2 scenarios, I was, okay, guys, it's 4 of us, 5 of us, or 3 of us. Let's forget about this talk. Let's go have a drink and chat.
And then off you go, and you probably had a lot better time.
Yeah, because it's really kind of, actually, I think that talks, like conference talks, work well with the larger audience. But when it's a smaller audience that can fit in a table, conversation is so much better than monologue. You cannot have a conversation with 200 people, right? That's why we do talks and Q&A, and number of people ask questions and what's not, right? But if it's 10 people, it doesn't have to be 3. Why do a talk?
Have a conversation. Now the question is, let's assume you're not doing keynote. You've got 150 people in the room. You got accepted. You got there. You're on the stage. You've got a reasonable number in the room. How do you run your talk?
By telling a story based on your experience, right? It's storytelling. And I know that this does not mean much to many. It kind of takes a bit of skill, time, investment, right? You just explain what you know. And try to do it in a casual way, because... So, actually, here's the thing that I told Whitney. When we did first or second talks together, she asked me, was this good? And I answered with the question, did you have fun? If you had fun while talking, it was good. Because nobody wants to hear uncomfortable person. If you get to the point that you're having fun on the stage, that's always a good talk. Think about it. When was the last time you heard a talk that you said that you thought, this person is having fun, is enjoying it, and at the same time you didn't like that talk? When I say fun, I don't mean fun like, oh, I'm making jokes only, but fun meaning enjoying.
Relaxed.
Yeah, exactly. You cannot enjoy something if you're not relaxed. Maybe some people, but majority.
Do you leave time at the end for questions or no?
I love doing that. Very often I would do sometimes that backfires, but sometimes I would, let's say if it's 40 minutes talk, I would do my talk in 20 minutes. Sometimes even faster. I love the questions. Because again, I like conversation more than a monologue, right? And to me, ideal situation is when the talk is more a way how to initiate conversation than means by itself. Now, the problem with giving a lot of time for questions is that sometimes there are no questions, and then you're in a nasty situation, like, oh, there's 20 minutes left. Nobody wants to ask anything. What the heck do I do, right? But again, you can recover from that as well. You can show something else or what's not.
What do you do when somebody can't give up the mic when they're asking a question, or they can't get to the point of the question?
You try to make the I'm not sure how to explain it. Not crack a joke, but you try to speed it up somehow by being maybe half funny, right? Kind of like, okay, is this for? I mean, you can joke at the person, but that can sometimes backfire. But what you can very easily do is re-ask the question, right? Because very often you will figure out long before it's finished what the question is. So if it takes too long, it's kind of, okay, so are you interested really in knowing this and that, right? And usually the answer is yes.
One thing you said there, just sort of in passing, is repeating back the question. Even if a person in the audience has a microphone to ask the question, go ahead and repeat it back. Because a lot of times they don't have a mic and other people didn't hear it.
Oh, yeah. Always repeat. There are actually different reasons for always repeating. First, because you are often better at formulating that question than the person asking it. So it becomes clearer for the audience what the question really is. Second, the audience might not have heard that question. And third, you might have been recorded and then you want that question to be kind of clear for those watching it afterwards. Which unfortunately is something I often forget to do. Because I'm so anxious to answer.
Because your clock is ticking down. So let me ask this question. How many times were you given 40 minutes for a talk and you decided, I'm just going to go 60? How many times have you done that?
Never. Not that I remember. Maybe early that I forgot. Because I always tend to finish earlier than... And to adapt, right? That's what we spoke before, right? Adapt. I would lose track of time and then speed up or slow down. Again, that's about not memorizing, right? If you're repeating the script word by word that you memorize, then you're much less flexible, right? Sometimes, kind of, okay, so this is, we just went through half of the demo and we're out of time. We have 5 more minutes. Let me tell you in 15 seconds what is the rest of what you're supposed to see, blah, 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 blah. Let's go. There we go, right? We didn't finish the demo. That's okay.
I guess my other side of that was going to be, that's a guaranteed surefire way to never get invited back to that conference.
If you go over time.
Yes.
Yes. I mean, I think that organizers are now stricter than they were in the past. Better organized, maybe. They will actually start giving you 10 minutes, 5 minutes. And then when you're 5 minutes overboard, they would come and pick you up.
Take you off stage and turn off the microphone.
Yeah.
So we've gone all over the place about speaking at conferences, trying to be accepted at conferences. What do you think? What has your experience been like? Head over to the Slack workspace, go to the podcast channel, look for episode number 272, and leave your comments there.
We hope this episode was helpful to you. If you want to discuss it or ask a question, please reach out to us. Our contact information and a link to the Slack workspace are at devopsparadox.com/contact. If you subscribe through Apple Podcast, be sure to leave us a review there. That helps other people discover this podcast. Go sign up right now at devopsparadox.com to receive an email whenever we drop the latest episode. Thank you for listening to DevOps Paradox.